Good evening, podcast world and Facebook Live. I bet y'all thought we wasn't coming back ever, didn't you?
Fat chance of that. Not that easy getting rid of us.
Time for another episode of Things My Mother Never Told Me.
Yeah, here we go.
Yes, it's Black History Month, and we've missed just about all of it, but we decided we were going to do an episode like we did last year. We're going to talk about some local Black history. Tynia, say hey to the people.
Hey, everybody. Yes, come and help us celebrate some Black stories.
Right.
Mhm.
We're going to talk today a little bit about Black Bottom and Paradise Valley in Detroit. A lot of you already know about it. Some of you actually lived it, but we thought we'd just share a little bit of what was going on back then and what happened to it in light of the fact that they're talking about doing away with that little stretch of freeway that caused them to destroy one of Detroit's jewels.
All right.
So Tynia, go ahead and jump on in with it.
Well, first of all, and if anybody has any questions or any stories they'd like to share, please just don't forget to text it in, and we will sure to get your questions answered. Of course, if we have our, our folks out there that lived in Black Bottom that told you anything specific, all right, you can just let us know. All right, we're going to start off with the Black Bottom neighborhood. Now, Black Bottom was a predominantly Black neighborhood in Detroit, Michigan, demolished for the redevelopment in the late 1950s to the early 1960s and replaced with the Lafayette Park Residential District and a freeway. It was located on Detroit's near east side, bounded by Gratiot Avenue, Bush Street, the Detroit River, and the Grand Trunk Railroad tracks. How about that?
All right, that's cute. Now look, here's the quick deal. Way back in the day, that area was a predominantly white area. It was and when Black was Jewish. And when our folks started moving up here from the South, they needed somewhere for them to live. And they purposely directed all of the Black folks that came from the South into that area.
Okay.
And okay, that's cool. But it became a flourishing area, tons of stores, people living there. And in fact, it was too many people living there at one time. It's in the 20s, it was about 41,000 people there, and it went up to 120,000 people in that area because so many were coming up here to work in auto factories. And Tynia's going to give you a little bit more history, but I just want to get to the nuts and bolts of it. When they decided they wanted to do something, they said they wanted to make it easier for the suburbanites to come into Detroit. And so because of that, they had to make way for that little stretch of freeway known as I-375. They wiped out the majority of that area just to put that in there. And y'all know that stretch of freeway is useless.
Oh, yeah.
But I've ran it long enough. Tynia, go ahead.
All right. Then where you want me to start, honey?
Start where you want to start.
Now, Black Bottom here has suffered more than most areas during the Great Depression, since many of the wage earners worked in the hard-hit auto industry. They was only making about $5 and 10 cents an hour. During World War II, both the economic activity and the physical decay of the Black Bottom rapidly increased as many more people poured into a city faced with a housing shortage, and racial discrimination restricted Blacks to the increasingly overcrowded Black Bottom area.
That's the only place we could live.
Well, that's it in a nutshell, for real. And through the 1950s, the migration transformed Hastings Street and St. Antoine Streets into the city's major African-American community or of Black-owned businesses, social institutions, and nightclubs, and nationally famous for its music scene in Paradise Valley.
Right. And a lot of y'all know this already, but Paradise Valley was actually where the entertainment was. It was a hub of Black entertainment in Detroit. It was where you wanted to go if you wanted to see anybody who was anybody. So that's the Paradise. And luckily, Paradise Valley kind of survived this. Black Bottom didn't do so well. In fact, I know that's where my parents lived And that's actually in that general area is where I was born. So, you know, it ain't there now. The streets that I used to live on has been long gone.
And I mean long gone, yeah. So, although the condemnation of the property began in 1946, the National Housing Act of 1949, then later, the 1956 National Highway Act, gave the city the funds to begin the urban renewal project in earnest, replacing Black Bottom and Paradise Valley with the Chrysler Freeway and the Lafayette Park. It's mixed income development designed by this architect from Germany, but that was an American born. His name was Ludwig Miles, but that ain't important. The East Side neighborhood was what's his name?
Eyes Vanderow.
Yeah, Ludwig.
If you are art history major, you know the name Vanderow. He's an architect. But you know, they gave the folks 30 days to get out, and they had to leave. And y'all remember Brewster Projects and the Jeffrey Projects. That's where they sent most of the people. And it's funny, and I know the people because my cousins grew up in the Brewster Projects, and I know a lot of people who lived in the housing projects. They were a tight-knit community. They had some wonderful times, and I mean, they all enjoyed each other. But across the country, there's always been, or there always was, the idea that we're going to put Black folks into these housing projects that are not really conducive to raising a family, because people living on top of each other, and that caused a lot of the bad things that you've seen in the housing projects, while other races and nationalities were being allowed to migrate to areas that had houses as opposed to boxes that were small apartments.
And you know what? I used to like that phrase, what they were saying too. What was that phrase called? Urban renewal is like Black removal.
Oh, okay.
That's the phrase that was developed.
Okay. Urban renewal, Black removal.
Right. One of the famous lands.
Right. So now let me just say this, you know, because a lot of times we talk about, I know when I first looked at pictures of Black Bottom, I said, you know, I thought to myself, I wouldn't want to live there. But then I had to think about it. And I'm looking through the lens of me being able to live where I want to live today. And so the area of Black Bottom, although if you look at it and compare it to today's standards, we might say, well, it was a decayed area, wasn't worth living there, it was, you know, blah, 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 and this and that. But think about coming up from the South, living in underdeveloped areas, looking for a betterment of yourself, and you get an opportunity to move up north and actually have your own house. You're living in an urban environment. You got stores. There were tons of pharmacies in the area. So you got all of this wonderful development around you. And I could imagine that for them, that was a wonderful place to live. It's like when I grew up on the East Side, it was a wonderful place to live. Would I live in that area today? Probably not. But growing up, we always step up from where we were. And so Black Bottom was, in fact, a great place to live for the people who lived there, because for one, discrimination wasn't so bad. It wasn't so rampant in that area because it was mostly us doing things for us.
Exactly. Yeah, like you said, we had restaurants. We didn't have restaurants where where they came from. They was living on plantations owned by other folk. Right. You know, they had their own grocery stores, Black owned. Right.
And if you people, those of you watching, you see Brandon's just put one of the pictures from Black Bottom, and you can see that it was really a thriving area. I mean, not much different from what many of us were accustomed to in the late 60s, early 70s. I should say late 60s, before the riots came and wiped out quite a few of the areas that we had there.
And let's just think about some of the names that came from out of there. First of all, we had Reverend C.L. Franklin, who started his first church there, and where Aretha Franklin was singing. You know, so we also had, who else do we have coming from out of there?
The ones that used to come down there and perform. You had Ethel Waters, Pearl Bailey, Ella Fitzgerald, the Ink Spots. They all performed at the Paradise Theater, which opened in 1941 in what used to be Orchestra Hall, which is again that. And then you had Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, Louis Armstrong, Dizzy Gillespie. So, I mean, you can see that's a thriving, you know, those are acts that you would see in Harlem in the Cotton Club.
Oh, yeah.
But they were coming into Detroit in the Paradise Valley, and they were putting on quite the show for the people who live there. And if you go down that area now, you will see Lafayette Park, Ford Field, and places like that. And it's funny because, you know, when I first heard about Black Bottom, I thought it was this little very narrow strip of land, probably about a mile long, 2 miles long. But when I was doing this research, looking at this, Black Bottom stretched from Jefferson all the way down to, was it 6 Mile? Did it had portions of it where people lived? I mean, or was it the Boulevard? But I mean, it stretched a long way.
Yes, it did.
It was quite a large area.
Of course, it had to accommodate 120,000 of us.
Well, it was only really room for 40,000.
Yeah, at that time, 41,000 was still
right. But I mean, it was 17 doctors that lived there, 10 restaurants, 6 drugstores. Barthwell Drugs was one of the most well-known ones. And so you can see that Black Bottom was a thriving area. And the sad part of that is that historically, every time we look across the United States, early 60s back, thriving Black areas don't seem to last long. And most of it has nothing to do with the residents.
Correct.
It's always a government, or always was some type of government action or action by, you know, going back further when we talk about Black Wall Street down in Tulsa, where it was an action by the majority race that caused our thriving areas to no longer exist. So you can see that it's hard for us to have stuff that's our own, especially when it's predominantly us. You know, they herded us into an area. When you came up here, you had to live there. You couldn't live anywhere else. And like again, depending on how old you are, I'm sure a lot of you know have stories to tell, or your parents or your grandparents had stories to tell about how they could only live in particular places, even here in Detroit. And so one of the other things that is good news is that at one time, there were over 300 Black-owned businesses in Paradise Valley. I mean, think about that. Beauty salons, restaurants, nightclubs, bowling alleys, bars, theaters, and watch this, many golf courses. So, and that's the first time I heard that, many golf courses. So, right. And then the other thing about it is that most of the people who lived there worked there. So if you didn't have a job in the factory, you actually had your employment in the Paradise Valley area. So that means that you basically could almost walk to work every day. You didn't necessarily need transportation to get there. And so then we come up with this, and here's the other thing. Y'all gonna love this. One of the big businesses in Paradise Valley was gambling.
Yes.
And in fact, I'm gonna read this one. In 1939, there was a scandal involving gamblers from Paradise Valley, Detroit police officers, and the mayor's office. So it wound up that some of the folks got put in jail. Some of the police officers, people from the mayor's office, were charged with accepting bribes.
Yeah.
And even coming forward in '63, the FBI raided the Gotham Hotel And they said they described it as the lavish Gotham Hotel, which was
Mhm.
a home to many jazz artists while they were in Paradise Valley. And it was for illegal gambling. Get that. Yeah. Cheryl said that Black Bottom was life for them and they were proud of it. Doc Esther thanking us for the information, enjoying it. How you doing, Rita? And so, you know, and the reason why this is even important right now is that I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are aware of the fact that, and I'll give Mayor Duggan this. He said that he recognized the wrongs that were done. In fact, Governor Whitmer, they've all acknowledged the wrongs that were done. And so they they passed legislation. They actually had federal money where they are going to tear 375 out and make it a surface grade boulevard. And we appreciate that. And they all say the same thing. We know it's not going to correct the wrongs that were done.
Correct.
Not going to do it because think about this. Black Bottom was basically wiped out in the 50s, basically. I mean, by 63, it was gone. So think about
generational wealth, honey,
right.
Gone.
Exactly. Think about the people who lived there. Now, I'll be 65 in a couple months. I wasn't working there. I wasn't doing it. I was too young. I was barely a glimmer in somebody's eye. So that means that my parents would have been the ones that would have had to actually be, if there was such a thing as reparations, you know, or some or wrong corrected. Well, both of them are deceased. And so I think each and every one of us has a story, if not that story, but a story similar to that we know of and maybe we have somebody, a relative who's of a certain age who actually lived the dream in Black Bottom. And so they're talking about doing this. That's almost like, a lot of us didn't think we ever see a Black president.
Yes.
Well, a lot of them never thought they would ever see Black Bottom again. And the fact of the matter is they really aren't going to. That's just the fact of the matter. And so what this means for us is that we really need to advocate for our stuff, our places that we live, businesses that we own, because as Tynia said, you know, generational wealth was available for a lot of us. There are a lot of families who could be better off now than they are now, if not for this travesty. There was this one gentleman, the one I said, the Barthwell Drugs, he actually worked in a drugstore or worked for a druggist, and then he systematically started buying their drugstores when he earned enough money. And so that's how he wound up building his empire. But his empire was basically wiped out when Black Bottom was wiped out.
Well, yeah. And then who did you say that it was Rita on the line?
Yeah.
Because I was letting Rita know he was a cast technician.
Oh yeah, that's right. He graduated from CAS. And so, but the beauty of that is, think about this, because he graduated from CAS back in
1925.
1925. Now, when you consider historically how Black folks were pushed into certain areas, for him to have graduated from CAS at that time and then become a successful druggist is almost unheard of.
Yeah, he went to Wayne, well, what do you say, Detroit Institute of Technology, which is now Wayne State Pharmaceutical School. And he graduated there in 1929. And they said, and he was so poor that the dean of the students had to, you know, loan him $25 to pay for his diploma.
Pay for his diploma.
Right. I was saying, you know what, that was a determined young man. Yeah. That's all I can say.
Right. But thank God that there was somebody who stepped in and at least did that much for him. Reverend May Alexander, how you doing? And here's one of our senior members of our church who she says, Black Bottom was during my era, but I really didn't get to explore it a lot because I was just a kid. and then as she grew older, really didn't have much interest in it. And so that goes to show you, the point that we're making. Our seniors, because it wasn't Black Bottom didn't become a big deal until it wasn't a deal anymore.
Right, correct. And just like you said, like you, Minister Alexander, Coleman Young, his father brought him there when he was 5.
Yeah.
But
right.
But the thing about it was he was there, and he ended up being the mayor, first Black mayor.
But now, how long Coleman Young been gone?
Ooh.
And he was 5. City Star JJ, what's up? How you doing, cuz? And so that's the kind of stuff that we want to get to. What you got something else for? Some more of your history.
How about, let's see. Now we're going to get to, do we want to go to what's happening now, or the person that
Yeah, we'll go there. I'm gonna say one more thing. This is the last thing. Then we're going to get to we're going to come up to current. Here's a piece for you. Automobile manufacturers outgrew city factories and relocated to suburban areas, necessitating the construction of expressways. Consequently, in 1959, destruction of Paradise Valley began to make way for the I-375 portion of the Chrysler Freeway.
And you know that little bitty strip.
And that was the
slur.
That was the point to show you that they decided to put everybody there, but then they decided, well, we want to expand, so y'all expendable. And so that segues us. Here's the headline that was in the paper. Governor Whitmer announces I-375 modernization project advancing in Detroit to reconnect communities, fix the damn roads, and create good paying jobs.
So what do you want me to start, honey?
Go where you want to.
Let's see. Now, Governor Gretchen, she announces that the state of Michigan is moving forward with the plans to replace the outdated I-375 freeway with an urban boulevard to spur economic development. With its conclusion of the environmental clearance phase, we will continue to move forward on this project. Since I took office, and like you said, fix the lane miles and the roads, as we continue getting things done on the roads, we must take a closer look at this unjust legacy of so many of our freeways. So this includes I-375, hundreds of small businesses, churches, and more. Now we must build up our state's infrastructure with equity at the core.
Right, so here's that quote I was telling you about. While we cannot change the past, we must work harder to build a more just future. And that starts with listening and engaging with the community and taking deliberate steps to get this done right. And Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, his quote was, as development has pushed east from downtown and west from Lafayette Park, the barrier that I-375 represents in our city has become even more apparent. So here's the thing. Here's the positive note of all this. It's just like the Juneteenth situation. When the folks in Texas finally got word, and in fact, finally got support of that word, that slavery was over, they had a choice to make. They could be mad, bitter, the whole 9 yards, but they chose to celebrate and live in the fact that they were free. And so what that means to me is that with this coming about, it's an opportunity for black folks, residents of the city of Detroit, and in fact, the Tri-County area, to get involved in what's going on with the planning of the redevelopment of the I-375 corridor, to be a voice. I know it's still on here. Some of our residents that live in the Avenue of Fashion area. You guys had the opportunity to express what you wanted to happen with what they did over there in 375, because you know when they made them changes, when they made it a boulevard, not 375, when they made Livernois a boulevard and did all the stuff they did over there, it almost killed the neighborhood. It made it hard for businesses, and at least when they decided to make changes, a lot of you guys were at the table saying what was right and what was wrong, what was good and what was bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so with this changing of the guard, if you will, bringing the Black Bottom, Paradise Valley areas back to neighborhood type areas where at least they'll be walkable. It's time for folks that live in Detroit to make sure that you're at the table when this happens. There is a lot of stuff that we need to get involved in. And so it's our business to get involved. If we don't get involved, then they're going to do it the way they want it done. And it's not going to look like what you want it to look like. If anybody wants, if somebody can type this in, but there are markers downtown, one that says Black Bottom on it, and then there's another one in Paradise Valley that show basically where those areas begin.
Mm-hmm.
You ain't doing that. You need to go down there one day and take a look at it. Brandis, put in there what the street is, because I think one of them is on what is the street? You don't remember?
Lafayette, and
it's on Lafayette.
It's in Lafayette Park.
Right, it's in Lafayette Park. I can't think of the cross street though. But they actually said that they want to do. They said we want to replicate what we did up on Livernois when we worked with neighbors to reimagine historic business district, which is now Detroit's most vibrant and successful Black-owned business corridor. And that's the key, is that Black businesses are not getting nearly enough space to be successful. With this happening, because it's going to be such a big deal, you know, it's going to be a lot of national media in town to celebrate, especially when they do the groundbreaking. Folks need to get their businesses together, those that want to do brick and mortar, and get down in Black Bottom. Residents need to get down there and be there, have your face in the place so they can see that we really care about what's going on in the city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it had been for Ray Smith. He had wrote a letter to the state in 2017 seeking the marker, and he was inspired, but to make the marker as a reality, make the marker a reality by his grandparents who lived in Black Bottom off of J Street. So he paid $4,000 to have that marker erected.
Mm-hmm. See, so that's even crazy. See, that's even crazy what I was saying. So he paid for the marker.
He paid.
See,
he paid $4,000. That's what it said.
All right.
He
But I mean,
sure
that's what you call putting your money behind where your mouth is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. What else you got?
It was just the way that the whole thing was destroyed. You know, the way it was destroyed with the eviction notices and the insufficient compensation for the property of homeowners, and the city with no real commitment to the public or affordable housing was just a horrible way to develop. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just. So I'm all for some type of compensation for even their relatives that's left. I mean, it's just. It was just horrible the way everything was done.
Right. How many of you oh man, you say you remember Barfwell drugs? Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see, that made me lose my train of thought when I saw her that she said that. I'm trying to find, this is what I wanted to ask. Now, everybody been downtown. You've been on Brush. you've been in a lot of the streets that went through what is considered Black Bottom and Paradise Valley. How many of you have ever seen Hastings Street? I'll wait. Brandis has the picture of the thing on the screen. But how many of you actually remember ever seeing Hastings Street? When I went out, I looked at a lot of pictures, tons of pictures. And Hastings Street was on probably 90% of pictures when Hastings Street ran through the area they were photographing. And that's my point. How can a street that was so prominent in an area just disappear? And it didn't disappear because they changed the name of it. I always wonder where Hastings Auto Parts came from. and yeah, I found out because of Hastings Street.
Oh yeah, Hastings and St. Anton was where the area where all the Black businesses were.
Right.
Black owned businesses were.
Right. Hastings and St. Antoine. Ooh, we built it into the thing. How'd that happen? Right. So, hey, Alicia, how you doing? Yanni, how you doing? Go ahead. Okay, so let me see what MDOT is supposed to be setting up public forums, and I think we should be on the lookout for that.
Oh yeah, they were talking about that because they were interviewing Bert.
Yeah, from Bert's Marketplace.
He was interviewing, and he was, and he was just explaining how he was from his
parents. Yeah,
and that's why he has all those pictures up and murals inside his establishment, and he kept it going. He kept it going. Everybody loved him down there. That food is delicious too. Right. But yeah, he was one of the ones that was on. They had interviewed.
Right. And so this is, for those that don't know, the new area that they're supposed to be building in, that they're building in, is supposed to be a street level boulevard. It's supposed to begin south of the I-75 interchange and go to the Detroit River at Atwater and let it run that way. It's supposed to connect Eastern Market, Brush Park, and then a new local corridor from Eastern Market to Gratiot. And it's supposed to make it so that you can get around without being in a motor vehicle. So that means you can ride your bike, you can walk, and it's actually going to connect to the DeQuinder Cut.
Okay.
Right. And that's part of what the master plan is that they're supposed to connect all of that footage, that ran along the railroad tracks down at Mac and what the DeQuinder Cut is. All of that's supposed to be a bike path. It's supposed to intertwine with the entire city of Detroit. So that's Black Bottom. We need to be on the lookout for the new area. I'm assuming they're going to call it Paradise Valley or something like that. And we need to be on the lookout for that area. And one last piece of tidbit I want to drop to you. It has nothing to do with Black Bottom.
It does.
No, it has nothing to do with Black Bottom, but it has every bit to do with the city of Detroit. Everybody know that it's a salt mine under the city of Detroit, right? That's not just a old wives' tale. I was looking and I saw this and I just had to write it down. It said that this Detroit mine salt was created in 1895 and it is still in existence today. It was discovered in 1895. 1906, Detroit Salt and Manufacturing Company came into existence, and they actually are digging up the salt beds from under the city of Detroit. They actually used to have tours where you could go down there and tour it.
You didn't tell me about this one.
Yeah, they literally had that. And they said in 1910, they completed a 1,060-foot shaft to go down into the mine. In 1912, a company called Watkins Salt Company, and they incorporated under the name of Detroit Rock Salt Company, and they went another 100 feet down, and they found another salt bed, and they have been working there and working there. In 1983, they had closed operations, and then Crystal Mines bought it. In 1997, Detroit Salt Company, LLC, bought the mine, and they produced in the fall of 1998. I mean, this is like crazy, because we heard all about the salt mines. I know a lot of you have heard about the salt, and it seemed like an old wives' tale. But it says road de-icing salt is the only product that the mine currently provides. How about that? In 2010, the Kisner Group purchased the salt company and ownership of the mine. And now those two companies work together to provide North America. I'll say that again, North America, with a full line of ice melter products ranging from bulk rock salt to bagged rock salt to premium blended formations.
Detroit is rich.
I had to throw that in there. That's probably one reason why we don't have a subway in Detroit. Because of that. Anyway. I'm serious because they had talked about putting the subway there, but the bottom line is that there is an active salt mine under the city of Detroit, and they used to give tours. They don't do them anymore. I think it's too dangerous for just regular citizens to go down there. And that, my friends, is your walking tour of Detroit, Black Bottom, Paradise Valley, and then the Detroit Salt Mine. Join us again next week as we give you more interesting facts about the city of Detroit.
Yeah. How about highlighting our famous Blacks?
Yeah, we're going to talk about some of the people who actually did some things in Detroit. And those of you who know me, email me, text me, people that you know about that did things, family members, or people that you just know about, or people that you want to know about. And we will talk about them next week as we try to ramp up this podcast and get it back on track. Until then, we'll talk to you later.
All right, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for joining us. Yep. As I always say on my radio, on my internet music show, we up out of here. Peace.